So welcome everyone. Glad to have you with us here today, and appreciate your flexibility. As you may have heard, we did this session this morning at 10 o'clock, but discovered that we had a limit of 100 people that could join in. So we decided quickly to do this again, and so we set it up here for this afternoon. And I'm very glad that we did, because we're up over 150, almost 160 people here right now that have joined us. So glad to have you with us. My name is Bob Bethel. I'm with the Employers Association, and with me today is Bob Bobek from Gilmore Jasion, and we'll be talking about the new law that was just signed into effect last night, as a matter of fact, that will affect many of you. And so we'll try to explain some of those things, both from a human resource and a business standpoint, how this may affect your businesses here. As I've mentioned before, we are recording this and we will send the recording out. But if you'd like to have us do that, please put your email address in the chat area so that we are sure to have that, so that we can send this out to you. We will have enough time to take some questions afterwards. So if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat area, and we'll address those at the end of the session. We should have plenty of time to do that. We'll also invite you to unmute and ask any questions that you might have at the end of this session here today. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and go through a little more introduction with Bob, and we will get started here. So as I said, this is a joint venture here, so to speak, between Gilmore Jasion Mahler and the Employers Association. So we're happy to have you with us here today. And Bob Bobek will be joining us here, or has joined us from Gilmore Jasion Mahler. And Bob is an assurance partner with Gilmore Jasion, and will be handling the part here today about how things affect you from especially the PPP program, and he'll go into details about that. And I am here with the Employers Association, and I'll talk to you about a few things that have to do with mainly the human resource side of things here. So we'll not take a lot of time to go through our resumes, but that is available. And so Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll come back on here in just a second to talk about the HR things. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob, and welcome everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. When we first put this slide in here, we thought when the law passed overwhelmingly by the House of Representatives and Senate, that it would quickly be signed into law. And I think I found out like 9 o'clock last night that the president finally signed the law. It was kind of like, should we have a lump of coal here instead of a gift? But instead we got the gift we're looking for. And so there's a lot of good benefits in this law. And so if we can go to the next page. So the actual law has a lot more into it, in addition to the $900 billion stimulus for an American economy. It's called the Consolidated Appropriation Acts of 2021. It is the longest, I think, law ever published. It's almost 5,600 pages long. Embedded in the law is the US government spending bill and a lot of other items. It was passed by both the Senate and the House of Representatives December 21st, a week ago, and was sent to the president to sign the law immediately. He initially did not want to sign it, was hoping to get more money for Americans, but late last night he did sign it into law, and now it's in law. He has made comments asking for larger stimulus payments and other items for America. But right now, as the law is written, we're going to cover it today. The law was passed twice through the House of Representatives. The second time, 359 in favor, 43 against. And in the Senate, 91 in favor, 7 against. So you can see this bill has overwhelming support, bipartisan support. Most of the presentation was written based upon the past bill. We expect some additional guidance. So in the major provisions here is it ends the mandate to provide emergency paid sick leave, which Bob Bethel will be talking about shortly. And again, another round of direct payments to Americans. Continuation of additional payments of unemployment that was expiring, I believe, was this weekend. And that's been re-extended. Continuation expansion of the PPP Forgivable Loan Program. They've opened up back up the old program, and they have a PPP2 that we're going to be talking about. And a lot of other provisions provide much needed liquidity to, again, struggling sectors of our economy. As you know, the restaurants, hospitalities, you know, a lot of service organizations continue to struggle simply because they cannot see as many customers as they did in the past. And so there's a lot of provisions in here to help those struggling businesses.
Okay, well, let me talk here just for a few minutes about some of the provisions of the emergency paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave. The interesting thing with the way this was set up in this law was that it does end the employer mandate to provide employer emergency paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave that was required by the CARES Act that was passed back and effective in April of this year. So what this does, and quite honestly, I fully expected, again, from my human resource experience, that that this would be a big part of any new law. And for a long time, it did not look like it was going to be part of the law. But at the last minute, they did include some language in here. But it's really interesting, I think, the way it was put into this law. What this does is it does end the employer mandate to provide this leave, this paid leave that has been in place since April, but it allows employers to still take the credit and paid leave, allow paid leave through March 31st of this coming year for both employer paid sick leave and the expanded family medical leave. And so this is something that it's the primary extension is really about the tax credit that is available. Employers do not have to continue to offer this emergency paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave. They can choose to do that. And if they do choose to do that, they will still be able to take that employer tax credit that is part of the original law. One of the questions that came up a couple times in the session this morning was about whether it sort of renewed the ability for employees to take the 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave, and it does not. This does not create a new pool of money or a pool of time that employees can take. This only extends the ability for employers to be able to provide this leave through March 31st of this year. So hopefully that's clear, but if you have questions, we'll take those questions at the end of this session here today. So one of the other things that this did, and really what was causing a large part of the holdup, it wasn't really all of the holdup, but this was what was certainly gaining the most attention in the media, was this idea of the direct payments to Americans. So the law does include in there a one-time cash payment to eligible people for $600, and so the family of four could receive up to $2,400. There are limits on there, just as there was with the first one. Of course, the first direct payments to Americans was $1,200 earlier this year. This one is $600 only. Same sort of limitations on here. It's for people who make less than $75,000 or $150,000 if they are filing jointly. It does not cut off immediately if you make over that amount, but the amount is reduced at a rate of $5 per 100 of additional income. So there is a final limit on there, but it does not mean that if you make over 75,000 or over 150,000, if you're filing jointly, that you're completely cut off there. This will be based on the adjusted gross incomes from either 2018 or 19, and will be direct deposited into people's accounts if they have that set up in there. So one of the things that originally when this was passed by Congress, there was talk about these checks being mailed out as soon as this week. with a delay that was caused by the president not signing this until yesterday. From what I'm hearing, those checks will not be sent out until probably beginning next week. And so we'll see exactly when they're sent out, but probably not immediately. And of course, there is still that potential for a second check to be issued sometime later. Could be as late as after the inauguration that takes place on January 20th. So yeah, I mentioned just that briefly that this was sort of the headline of why this was held up. There was some other talk in there also that part of the reason that it was held up this long was the president felt like there were too many other things that were included in this, pork as it is referred to, but that didn't seem to gain a lot of attention on there, and whether it's all political posturing is a little hard to determine. But as we talked about this morning, we're not going to try to get into some of the political discussion that could go along with this, but it did ultimately the big issue is that it did get passed. So this includes also then an extension of the unemployment insurance program, and there are a couple different parts to this unemployment program that we have. But it extends the pandemic unemployment assistance program and the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation programs until March 14th of this coming year. So just as a way of explanation, because these things can get a little confusing, the PUA, the unemployment assistance plan, is for contractors and other people who are not ordinarily eligible for unemployment benefits. People who are independent contractors or some small business owners don't normally pay into unemployment compensation insurance, and so therefore haven't been eligible in the past. But with the CARES Act that was put into place earlier this year, they did become eligible for unemployment through this special program. This has now been extended to allow them to continue to be eligible for that. The PEUC, or the Emergency Unemployment Compensation, provides an additional 13 weeks of unemployment for individuals who previously collected the unemployment, but it exhausted those things. So this provides them for another 13 weeks of time, and that has been extended then until the 14th of March. This provision in the law also provides another $300 per week for 11 weeks. If you remember before, the additional amount, the federal supplement, was $600, and this was a compromise amount that was agreed to for that $300. So it also extends the number of weeks of benefits available for eligible people from 39 weeks to 50 weeks, and it also eliminates the waiting week that is normally part of unemployment insurance. And normally there's 1 week that is unpaid. This eliminates that waiting week. And so just to be clear too, the additional $300 is in addition to the unemployment insurance payments that are available through the state program, just like the earlier program was for $600. In order to be eligible for these things, it has to be related to COVID-19, and there are 11 very specific reasons for that, and it's similar to the Families First Coronavirus Act that was put into place about this time as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Bob, to talk more about the Paycheck Protection Plan.
Well, thank you, Bob. So the big item that we'd like to start with on this Paycheck Protection Plan modification was that when the law was first passed in March of 2020, Congress intended that any income from the forgiveness of these PPP loans would be not taxable. And then later in April, the IRS reviewed how they would implement the law and agreed with Congress that the income wasn't taxable, but concluded that any expenses that were part of the expenses forgiven under the loan program would not be tax deductible. So in theory, making it taxable income. Then later on, just about a month ago, the IRS further ruled that regardless of when you hear from the SBA on your forgiveness, could you go back a slide there, Bob? So until you hear back from the SBA on forgiveness, those expenses would not be deductible in 2020. So this was causing a lot of heartburn for a lot of our clients, companies we were talking about, because they didn't know whether or not they were going to have to pay taxes on this forgiven income. So the great news is that in this bill, Congress fixed it. And they clearly say that these expenses are tax deductible. Okay, and this income related to forgiveness is not taxable income. So now they're giving you your tax deduction back. Furthermore, they went on to say there was a lot of concern that, let's say you were claiming the research and development tax credits, and a lot of times those are based upon wages. And whether or not those wages, if they were forgiven, would you be entitled to still claim these R&D tax credits and other credits? And they clearly say, yes, you will still, those are qualifying wages. You still have basis in those to claim those credits. Okay, Bob. So this bill has a lot of other tax provisions and extensions. I mean, I think there's over 75 that I saw listed, but I thought the couple I'd bring to everyone's attention. Currently, meals expenses are only 50% deductible. So when you have a business meal, you can only deduct 50% expenses. Starting January 1st through December 31st of 2022, you will now be entitled to 100% deduction for these business meal expenses. So that's something that many clients, many companies can take advantage of. A lot of the credits that we see taken by a lot of our clients are the Section 179D. This is for energy efficient improvements, putting in a new energy efficient heating system, air conditioning system, lighting system. They've extended that. And then also the work opportunity credit. These are tax credits that if you hire someone that's currently unemployed, there's a federal credit available to you. They again extend these credits. They were both expiring and they re-extended them. So there's been major provisions or changes to the current Paycheck Protection Program. So it extends the period to apply for first-time borrowers. So there are certain entities maybe that could not take advantage of this for various reasons when the program closed on August 31st, 2020. So now been made available to anyone that had not previously filed for a PPP loan, they can get one. And let's say, for example, they applied and they miscalculated their loan and didn't claim a large enough amount. They could reapply and claim an additional amount for whatever qualifying expenses they left off on their original application. Now, this is the same PPP program that was that everyone was applying under throughout the summer and spring. So a lot of the rules are exactly the same. They have now increased the number of eligible participants. So in the past, it was just not-for-profits or 501c3s. Now they've extended that to be 501c6s, churches and other not-for-profits. The other big change here is that under the previous program, if you applied for an EIDL grant, EIDL grant, and you got a $10,000 grant, you were supposed to subtract this off of the amount of eligible forgivable cost under the PPP program. So at a minimum, you might have owed back $10,000. They said this is no longer required. And I believe they're going to set up a process for those loans that were already forgiven and charge this $10,000 to go back and reclaim this $10,000 and get that money paid back to you if you've already paid back that portion of the loan. So, or it will be ultimately forgiven. So this has been fixed. I know there's a lot of companies we heard that were not happy with this decision, the earlier decision. So again, it's same rules. You have to have less than 500 employees. This is the old program. It's per location for companies in hospitality and food services. Maximum loan here was 10 million, 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. You had up to either 2 to 5 years to pay the loan back if it was not forgiven. Those loans that were issued after June 5th had a 5-year maturity. Those issued before then had a 2-year maturity. The interest rate was 1%. You know, the allowable costs under the previous program were, and still remain, are payroll costs, group health insurance, retirement, interest on mortgage payments, rent, utilities, and other debt. Now they've expanded the available additional covered costs to be operation expenses, supplier cost, work protection expenditures, and property damage costs And we'll be going through all these shortly. Again, you have to make a good faith certification that to be an eligible recipient, that you have uncertainty at the time of the loan. Under the original program, they were waiving the guarantee fee payments. They also waived the requirement that if a small business had a other line of credit, they had to use that first. That's no longer required. And in the law, they have now reiterated the fact that at least 60% of the cost has to be payroll costs, and thus no more than 40% of the remaining costs could be non-payroll costs. Again, there's a process to apply for forgiveness. I know a lot of our clients and companies we talked to have already done this. Many of them have received forgiveness. They have to make it clear in the law that you can take a covered period anywhere from 8 weeks through 24 weeks. Again, so that was repeated in the law, and it's stated now. I think when they did the amendment in the summer, it was, everyone believed it was 8 or 24 weeks. SBA ruled you can do up to 24, and now the law repeats that guidance. Again, there was a December 31st, 2020 for FTE reductions, that if you rehire them by the end of this year, you will not be impacted by an FTE reduction. I believe that date was never changed. I'm looking to see if that date was re-extended, but I believe it still remains at December 31st, 2020. And the last amount is what we already spoke about the loan forgiveness income shall not be taxable income. So now there's PPP Loans Round 2. So this is the second round of PPP loans. Again, this is Congress has allocated $284 billion for these loans. They are targeting smaller businesses and those companies more negatively impacted by the pandemic. How they're defining that is that to be an eligible borrower, you must show a 25% reduction in revenue in the first, second, third, or fourth quarter of 2020 as compared with the same quarter in 2019. Now, it's our understanding that they're going to come out with a revised application to capture this additional information for round 2. It is a forgivable loan, just like in round 1. 284 billion was roughly, I think, what the first round of the original PPP were, and that was used up quickly. Again, don't really know how this round's going to be used up, if it's going to be, really sought after. But again, our recommendations are, as soon as the applications are made available, if you're interested in participating in this round 2, you should apply. So again, this one's targeting more smaller companies. So the first round had 500 employees or less. PPP2 requires you have 300 employees or less. Again, they have the exception for restaurant hospitality businesses that's per physical location. Round 2 has a cap of $2 million per loan, as round 1 had 10 million. It's calculated the same way, 2.5 times your monthly payroll cost, except for those in the restaurant hospitality business, or NAICS code 72. You get to use 3.5 times your average payroll. Again, all the same allowable costs, payroll costs, health insurance, and all the rest of those costs, plus the expanded costs that we already talked to, operating expenditures, supply costs, workers' protection expenditures, and property damage costs. And we will go over each of those categories now. So a covered operation expense. These are payments for business software, cloud computing services that facilitate the business operations, products, or service delivery, the processing, payment, or tracking of payroll expenses, human resources, sales and billing functions, or accounting or tracking supplies, inventory records, and expenses. So pretty much what I would call your back office support. These are your normal expenses that you incur to operate your business from an administrative standpoint. The next one is covered supplier costs. So this is goods that you buy from a supplier to operate your business. So in the food, or if you're a restaurant, this is your food cost. Okay, are essential to the operations of the entity and are made under a contract order or purchase order. So again, a lot of companies have essential supplier costs. And so that those also qualify. Covered period damage costs is an interesting one. This is the cost related to property damage and vandalism or looting due to the public disturbances that occurred during 2020 and were not already covered by insurance or other compensation. So again, this is helping out, I think, the small restaurants and retailers that were badly damaged due to some of this vandalism. And the last section is covered workers' protection expenditure cost. This is all the standard stuff that you would think of that you had to do due to the pandemic, such as buying, cleaning your offices more on a regular basis, buying masks for your employees, all the required normal stuff, plus any changes to your facility you had to make due to social distancing or spacing people apart. And so, a couple examples given is a drive-through window facility, indoor, outdoor combined air or air pressure ventilation systems, physical barriers, and various other health screening requirements. So again, off-site and on-site. So any costs that you have relate to that. Again, going to the forgiveness now of these loans, we've seen a lot of loans apply forgiveness. And I just was talking to actually a banker right before this, and he says that he's seeing loans of less than $2 million being forgiven in about 2 weeks after applying. SBA had issued a simplified forgiveness application for loans at or below 50,000. Under this law, that has now been raised to 150,000. And that previous simplified forgiveness application was 2 pages. This law requires it to be a 1-page application. So pretty much just certifying that you used the money correctly is my understanding. So again, I've not seen this application, and they have 24 days to develop it and make it available. You must always retain your relevant records, support your expenditures for 4 years. And then also under this new PPP opening, they have a set aside now for smaller businesses, because a lot of smaller businesses were shut out of the first round. So they now have a set aside for borrowers with 10 or fewer employees. Those first time PPP borrowers that are just allowed to apply. And then loans made from community lenders, those in the hard hit neighborhoods. So another question we're seeing from a lot of our clients is this $2 million loan questionnaire. And if you all recall, when the PPP program was first opened up, there were some publicly traded companies that immediately applied for and granted $10 million loans. And that created a lot of uproar in the press. And so at that point, the SBA issued a requirement that says if you're publicly traded or didn't meet the necessity requirements, that you should pay the loan back. And so they said also that they were going to review all loans over 2 million. So about 2 months ago, they issued a $2 million loan questionnaire, one for for-profits and one for not-for-profits. And it's quite lengthy, and it goes way beyond a lot of the requirements of the original PPP loans. They're asking for owner's compensation, owner's distributions, your net equity in your company. Is getting very intrusive. The SBA has started to send these out, and upon receiving them from the SBA, you have 10 days to resubmit it back to the SBA. The AGC, Association of General Contractors, when this first questionnaire came out, sued the SBA and said this was way too intrusive, and that a lot of construction companies right at the beginning of the pandemic were not hit really hard simply because they were just starting up their jobs and they were required to stay on their jobs. But they got hit later on in the fall and stuff like that. And so they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be challenged because of this. And because of this lawsuit, the SBA issued question 53 under their Q&A, which is one form of guidance for PPP issued by the SBA. And in it, it says that it will take into account circumstances and actions before and after date of loan application as to determine this uncertainty. So again, they will consider events that happen maybe 6 months after you got your loan. It appears by this question and the way it looks like this questionnaire is rolling out, there's about 31,000 loans over the $2 million. And the SBA has 90 days to respond to all these. So it looks like they're going to take what's in this questionnaire first. And so there are boxes in this questionnaire where you can add additional information that you want to include as to why you had this need. And we're encouraging clients to use up all that space because it could be the simple fact that they're not going to read anything more than what's on that questionnaire, even though you have attachments. Also from looking at this, that if there is something on that questionnaire that they would question, they would give you time then to submit your attachments and provide additional documentation. So another thing that was a lot of our clients saw that if they had an existing SBA 7A loan, that the SBA made 6 monthly payments for them during 2020. And this ended September 30th of 2020. Under this law, it's been re-extended for another year. So if you have a loan that has not yet received these 6 months, you'll be eligible for that in the next year. And there's some other additional loans that might be available or eligible for a 3-month payment by the SBA. And then there's an additional 5 months for those hard hit industries. Again, it's the restaurants, the hospitalities, where the SBA will make the payments. Yep. So what else in this loan is a lot of money spent on areas of the economy where Congress felt a need. There's $82 billion in funding for colleges and schools, high schools, and anywhere from kindergarten through high school. And a significant amount of it is direct support for their heating and air conditioning repair replacement to mitigate virus transmission. So they're putting a lot of money towards this to make sure schools, when they reopen, have clean air. And then another $10 billion in childcare assistance. There's $7 billion for broadband expansion to make sure that everyone can get attached to the internet if they want to. There's $69 billion for vaccines testing and health providers to roll out the vaccines. It's exciting news this last couple of weeks that we have 2 vaccines available and people are starting to receive them. And that will be, I hope, the eventual way we climb out of this. $13 billion for emergency food assistance, which includes a 15% increase in 6 months of SNAP program. And $22 billion for health-related expenses incurred by state and local governments. So the state and local governments getting hit hard with a lot of unusual costs related to this pandemic. And then finally, there's $25 billion emergency rental aid. So there was a national eviction moratorium that was going to end this December 31st. That has now been extended to January 31st. And really, you know, the other side of this coin is there's some small landlords that have been really hit hard because they've been going months without collecting any rental payments. And so Congress recognized that and has allocated $25 billion to allow tenants to access these funds to make their rent payments. So this should help give some relief to those landlords. Okay. Well, that ends it. We're open for questions.
So I'll jump in. My name's Susan Ross Wells. I work with Bob at Gilmore Jason Mahler. I'm going to kind of be moderating our Q&A session this afternoon. And I'm going to start in the chat because we got a few questions coming in here, and certainly we'll open this up to obviously folks unmuting themselves and just sharing. But the first one came from Rebecca. She wanted to know, are 501c4s eligible for the new round of PPP? They were not in round 1.
I believe so. But again, it was very clear what 501c6s were. We can get a more definitive answer. But I believe they're expanding it for, I think, all not-for-profits.
Okay. All right, we also had a question from Rebecca. She wanted to know, do they have to include the stimulus funds in the 2020 income calculation when comparing it to 2019 to determine the eligibility? And similar question, I believe, from Nancy. Yeah, will CARES relief funding be included in that 2020 revenue calculation for PPP2?
Again, couldn't tell from the law. We'll have to look into that one.
Okay.
The way the law was written, it's like 500 pages of the stimulus out of almost 6,000 pages. And a lot of it was referencing existing provisions in the CARES Act that was passed in March and just amending them or changing them. So it wasn't an easy read, to be quite honest with you. And again, some of this I think will come out of guidance instead of through the law.
Okay. All right, Bob, here's another one from Candy. She said, if an employee contracted COVID over 4 weeks ago, exhausted the 80 hours of paid sick leave, but is still sick and under medical care, do they qualify for PUA? Bob, Bethel, that sounds like one you're going to tackle.
Yes, and my understanding is that they will be eligible for that. It is one of the changes with unemployment through this time that has been that individuals who have exhausted this emergency paid sick leave or even weren't eligible for it, but were not able to work because of COVID-related reasons, are eligible for this unemployment insurance now. In the past, of course, in order to be eligible for unemployment, a person had to be available for work. However, with this current pandemic that we're in, changes that were made to unemployment allowed people to be able to collect unemployment for COVID-related reasons. So in that scenario that was just questioned, yes, it looks like that person would be eligible for unemployment in that case.
Okay. All right, they're flying in now, the questions. I had to scroll up. Okay. Here's a question about, obviously from a healthcare provider, any word on whether the provider relief payments from HHS are still taxable income?
That's a good question. The law is very clear that the PPP loan forgiveness is not. Again, that might be another section of law that speaks to that question. We'd have to do further research on that one.
Okay. All right, Darla wanted to know, are the 6 months of payments made by the SBA for existing SBA loans taxable as income for 2020?
I believe they're tax exempt. They're not taxable income. I believe reading that in the law that also was similar to the PPP.
All right. Steve is asking, what is the period of time for which expenses will be considered to determine how much of a PPP loan for which business is eligible? Did that make sense? Did I read that correctly?
Well, yeah, so it depends on if you're going through PPP program 1 or PPP program 2. It's a 12-month average payroll times 2.5 months. So that's your loan. So you take your 12-month average payroll, and it looks like for PPP2, it's a 12 months prior to your application, which was similar to the way the PPP was worded, but everyone was using 2019. Annual payroll divided by 12, then times 2.5 times. If you're going for PPP2 and you're in the hospitality or restaurant, you get to multiply it times 3.5 times.
All right, Steve, hopefully that answered your question. Okay, Patty is asking, do you need to apply for the first PPP loan forgiveness before applying for a second PPP loan? And also, if we've already passed the end of the PPP period, should we apply for forgiveness now, or is there any advantage to waiting?
To my knowledge, there's no advantage to waiting. If you met the requirements, go ahead and complete your forgiveness application and submit it. Again, I believe Patty's loan would probably be in one of the smaller ones and probably would get quick forgiveness. And then you can then apply for PPP2. I don't think there's anything in the law that says you must get forgiveness on one before you go for number two. So you could still not have yet got forgiveness on the first round and still apply for the second round, to the best of my knowledge.
All right, here's another one. Is the EE retention credit expansion retroactive back to the CARES Act date, or does it only expand from date of passage forward? For example, 10,000 a quarter versus per year, 60% of wage instead of 50% available to PPP participants.
Bethel, you want to try that one?
Yeah, I think that my understanding is that in order to have that employee retention, they are going to measure it from the time of April 1st when the CARES Act first passed. And so that's if you're so just make sure I understand the question there. There is a provision in there that in order to get loan forgiveness, you have to have employee retention at the same level as you had prior to this pandemic hitting. And so I believe that it still applies back to that original April 1st date.
Okay, here's one from Mercedes. She says that they've received full SBA forgiveness for their PPP loan, but she just wanted a clarification that she heard correctly, that the income from that forgiveness is not taxable and that the expenses are also tax deductible.
Yes, that is correct, Mercedes.
I think you just made Mercedes' day. She
Yeah,
wanted
Christmas present,
verification of that.
Yes.
Probably made a lot of people's day with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Jeff had a question. Any idea yet when the government will begin accepting PPP2 loans for eligible businesses?
Well, no, I don't. They will give some heads up before they do it, like they originally did with the first law. I think the law was passed, if my memory serves me right, March 27th, and they started receiving applications, I believe, the following Friday. Again, I would think this application for PPP2 would be very similar to the first one with some modifications. So again, they should probably be able to get that out quickly. And so maybe within a week, we can be submitting applications, but not sure when they're going to have it available.
Okay. All right. How are the FTEs going to be calculated?
No change from the existing law. It's the 40 hours for each one-time full-time equivalent. And you still have the same look-back periods and stuff like that.
All right, here's a question from Ambria. I think I'm saying that right. She had lost her internet connection and wasn't sure if we answered her question, and we did not. Her question was, did they identify the definition of a small landlord?
Again, that was just a quote that I got from an article. Again, there's nothing in the law that says you have to be a small landlord to participate in this program. This program is always going to be for your tenants, not for you as a landlord. And so your tenants need to apply for this money to pay their back rent. And I believe that'll probably go through LMHA or the Housing Authority. That's normally the agency that handles those types of payments.
Okay, Grant is asking, is SBA debt, like the previous 6 months of principal and interest relief, available for new SBA loans that are executed in 2021?
Under the old rules, yes, I believe it's still going to stay the same. So under the old rules, if you got a new SBA loan, they would still give you the 6 months if it was closed by September 30th, 2020. When I read that section of the law again, it was not very easy to read, but it looks like that it would be. Contact your banker.
All right, for very small operations that only got an EIDL grant, does it have to be included as income for income tax calculation?
Not sure of that. Because again, I'd have to recheck the law, because I believe the section of law was only talking to PPP loans. But we can double check that and get back to that individual.
Okay. All right. I like this question, which is, what is our large takeaway from the signing of this bill? So like, what's the big picture? You know, what should we be concerned about? Sort of the larger view.
Well, again, you know, every time I go to economic presentation, we're in a second dip of a recession. So this is a double dip recession. You know, a lot of businesses are being forced to shut down again. The economy is starting to stall a little bit. And so this bill is providing some liquidity into the economy to keep it going through these troubling times. You know, we got the vaccine coming out now, and hopefully this is the last of it, and we can start slowly climbing back into business. Ultimately, I think there's going to be a huge pent-up demand coming in the late summer to the fall, where people that have postponed taking trips and going out will start going out once they get vaccinated and feel more comfortable. And everything I hear and read is the economy should bounce back quickly and very rapidly. So again, this is just a patch to get us to that. It's very costly, but it's, I think, necessary to get us through this tough period. Bob, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things on there. I think that I think it's significant that these unemployment programs are extended, but they're extended just for a 3-month period. You know, I think it backs up what you're saying there, Bob, that there's the expectation as things start to change that that won't be necessary because we will be bouncing back. And I think it's also significant that that the amount, the supplement is only $300 this time versus $600 last time. I think that there's, I think it was recognized that one of the things that made it really tough for employers when during that $600 supplement period is that for so many people that it was more beneficial to not work than it was to work, and so I was glad to see that they cut that down. I think that that's again another indication to me to support what you're saying, that Bob, that that the expectation is that things will start to bounce back, and this is only a short-term need. I hope that even with the new administration coming in, that we don't overreact to supplying a lot more stimulus out there that might come naturally just because of that pent-up demand. So we'll see what happens as we go forward. But I think it's a signal that Congress was willing to help, but that there's hope that things will get better sometime soon.
Okay. All right, here's another more specific question from an attendee wanting to know, a lot of businesses did not apply for the EIDL grant due to it being deducted from the PPP forgiven amount. Now that that's changed, is it possible to still get that EIDL grant from SBA?
Yes, I believe so. I think it reopened it. It ran out of money the first time around. So a lot of people that even wanted to get it could not get it because the funds have been used, and they've reopened it. So yeah, I believe you could be able to get it.
That is the end of our questions. A couple folks did ask, can they get a copy of the presentation? And I know we'll be emailing not only the recording link, but the slides as well. So I think that'll be helpful to some folks, but unless I see any others, that's all I've got here.
Okay, along that line also, I'd mentioned at the beginning and before we get started here that if you do want a copy of the slides and the recording, to please put your email address in the chat area so that we ensure that we have that. So if you haven't done that yet, please put your email address over in the chat area, and that will allow us to send this information to you. One other thing that I will mention as I did this morning, and it's really not related to this bill that was just passed, but it's a question that's come up quite a bit from our members at the Employers Association, is the idea regarding vaccines and whether companies will be able to require their employees to get the vaccine. And from everything I've read, yes, it is going to be possible for companies to require that of employees, but it's most likely that the companies that will be able to do that are the ones that can prove that there's a business need to have that. So, for instance, healthcare providers, very common. In fact, it's very common for healthcare providers to require the flu vaccine of their employees. I think this will be viewed much the same way, or any organization that has a lot of public contact with their employees may very well be able to require that. So again, you're going to have to prove a business need, but in general, I think it'll be very well accepted that you can do that. However, the other thing that I am reading and strongly believe is that it would be unwise for companies to do that before the vaccine is fully authorized. Right now, as I'm sure you're all aware, that it's under an emergency authorization for both of the vaccines that have been approved right now. And so probably wouldn't be a good idea to require that until it's full, either of these or any future vaccines are fully authorized, just to eliminate any risk that is there. And when you do if you do require that vaccine, you're still going to have to allow for accommodations for people either with disabilities or with sincerely held religious beliefs. So you're going to have to be prepared to provide those sort of accommodations for people in either of those situations. So just wanted to throw that in there because that's something that is sort of a hot topic here right now as well. We sure hope that that the provision of these vaccines will help to restore our country, restore our economy, and protect a lot of people here in the country. So so I think that that's it. I didn't see any other questions pop up here. Again, I saw a lot of email addresses being added to there. So if you haven't done that yet, please add your email address there, and we will be happy to send you the recording of this session today, or the one from this afternoon. We'll determine which is sort of the better quality and get that out. And we'll also include the slides that we used to present this information today. So I'll keep the Zoom meeting open for a few minutes in case others need to add their email addresses in there. Other than that, I think we are good. Bob or Susan, anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you everyone for joining us. We had a good crowd again.
Yeah.
Second time.
Yeah, I looked at the highest number I saw while we were presenting was up to 217 attendees.
Yeah.
So good turnout. I'm glad you guys suggested that we do this again this afternoon, and hopefully everybody has been able to find this information helpful and valuable. And if anything changes again, or if there's another PPP 3 or anything similar to that, we'll certainly arrange to get this done another time. So.
And as this guidance starts to unfold and we have better understanding of, some of these questions, we'll be posting that out on our website to make it available to people that are interested in learning more about some of these questions, and follow up with some of the more specific questions with those individuals if we get an answer.
I just saw another question come in from Dan real quick. I'm going to throw this out there. If granted a second, and by the way, he's on Connie's iPad. If granted a second PPP and it puts you over the 150,000 forgivable amount, are they looked at collectively?
Probably not, but that's a good question. No exact guidance on that. I would think that you can go ahead. And if your first loan's under 150, go ahead and get forgiveness right now on that. Because you probably met the requirements under the first round, and then apply for a second round. And I think as long as you're under 150, you should qualify to use that same application again. But again, that's a very good question, and we'll just have to wait for guidance on that.
Okay. Yeah, and the only other thing I was going to say is we've still got about 135 on here or so. So if anybody did have questions that they wanted to just unmute, to go ahead and ask that, feel free to do so now. And I'm seeing another one come in here from an attendee. Any change to the 401k distributions related to COVID hardship, and any word on whether that's been extended?
I believe that's been extended.
Okay,
I believe that's been extended.
excellent.
Reading that over the weekend.
So Bob, you haven't memorized all 5,500 pages, huh?
No, not quite. Did a lot of reading of this over the weekend.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Reading.
both. That was very helpful presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. As we said, I'll leave this up here for a few minutes to make sure everybody has their email address in here. And if you have further questions, again, feel free to contact me or contact Bob or contact Susan, and we'll do our best to help you with these things. So thank you. Everybody have a happy new year. And I think we're all looking forward to 2021. It'll be a good year, I'm sure. So
Yeah, thank you for attending. Happy New Year, everyone.